Hello everyone, and welcome to this user guide of the ship LOGR, which is my latest ship and also the most complex ship I have ever made in Stormworks. Also the most complex creation I have ever made. So the LOGR is going to have two versions, a complex version and a light version. The complex version is going to have 100% filled interior and all equipment included. The light version is going to have a reduced interior and a smaller package of equipment, and this is to have an option for players with maybe a PC who can't run the complex version, and it's also a better option for multiplayer, for private multiplayer use. Of course, public multiplayer servers will not accept even the light version without the consent of the server owners, so keep that in mind. But the light version is perfect for multiplayer with just your friends. The complex version is much more suited for single player use, long voyages, exploration and missions. But let's go straight into it. So the first thing you want to do is make your way up to the bridge. You're going to step over to the port side console here and turn this key. Then that is going to power up all the screens and the systems on the bridge. Next you want to just start the engines. And there we have both the engines running. On a ship like this you would normally have to do a lot of stuff down in the engine room as well to start up, but I'm keeping it simple. So next thing, we're going to sit down in the helm seat. So now we are going to go through the controls of the ship. What's special about this ship is that it's not using a propeller and rudders, it's using what's called azipod thrusters. I'm going to try to show you how they look. They're basically like azimuth thrusters, but they have a forward-facing propeller, so it's pulling the ship through the water instead of pushing it through the water. And these two thrusters can both be controlled individually, which is the basic steering mode on this ship. So we have two small screens here, and they are going to be your best friends. Say hello to the port side thruster and the starboard side thruster. These screens will show you which direction the azipod thrusters are pointing and how much throttle you are giving them. Like that. And as you can see, it's not violently turning the ship with a lot of throttle. So, you use WASD to control the port side thruster and the arrow keys to control the starboard side thruster. With this you can do a lot of interesting things like parallel movement and very sharp turns. And in order to reverse, this is I've used this steering system on other ships previously, and people have asked me, how do you put it in reverse? Simple. You just turn both the thrusters around like that. So this, as you can see, the small line shows the rotation target, and the longer line shows where the rotation is at the moment. So now I have now turned both thrusters facing forwards, and if I give throttle now, it is going to reverse the ship. It's that simple. And if you press 1, then it's going to reset the steering angle of both thrusters, like that. So you can of course drive the ship with just this steering mode, but for most driving, you're actually going to synchronize both these thrusters. Then you're going to push this button, sync steering and throttle. Now both thrusters are controlled with WASD. So now I give throttle with just pushing W, and as you can see through the orange line, it's now giving thrust to both the thrusters, and we're doing a speed of 23 knots, 24 knots, and increasing. So this is also limiting the steering angle, so you can drive in a much more natural way. When the thrusters have a 360-degree turn in the non-synchronized mode, now it has a much more reduced turn rate. That's because it's going to be much more natural to drive and feel like driving a normal, a rudder-controlled ship. And the steering angle will also reduce with speed to make it more easy to control. So that's the steering mode you're going to use most of the time. Next we have a sticky throttle lever. Now I'm just sitting here pushing W, which is going to be pretty tiresome if I want to do, especially if I want to do other work around the ship when we are in transit to a mission. So you can press this button, enable sticky throttle lever. Then this will light up, and you can now use the lever to control the ship. But if I push this lever off again, then it's going to reset the lever. And you can't use this lever if you don't have it enabled first. But you can only use this if the ship steering and throttle is synchronized. So if it's now enabled the lever and I desynchronize, it's going to turn the lever off. And you can't turn it on if it's not synchronized. So this is only for synchronized mode. Next thing I'm going to explain is the functions of some of the screens you have in front of you. First you have a screen displaying the ship status. It marks all the decks and essential rooms on the ship, and it's going to light up in either blue or red if it detects a fire or a leak. There is an automatic fire suppression system in the engine room, but you can manually trigger it from a button on the port side console. I will show you that later. You also have a main battery charge, reserve battery charge, and the fuel level. The next screen is a main screen. It has a normal interactive map, which you can move around. You have a radar, which is just not the normal radar, but also a radar combined with a LOGR. So if you don't know what that is, it's basically a laser radar. And that's how we used to make radars before we got the proper radar component in game. So I've added that because it does a much more realistic tracking of the surroundings, as you can see. So the red is the LiDAR and the green is the radar. Down here we have SOG. For those who are not familiar with nautical terms, SOG means speed over ground, and that is the amount of knots you are doing. So that is your speed in knots. DPT, that's just means the depth. So now it's 102 meters below the ship. We have 102 meters below the keel of the ship. That means 318 degrees. That's our compass heading at the moment. And the screen on the left there is a much more zoomed out map. You can also zoom it in, of course, but as it starts out in a very zoomed out position like that. You also have the GPS coordinates in the top left corner. So let's get back to some more of the steering and controls. You have stern thruster and a bow thruster. So with these you can push the bow either to the port or the starboard side. The same with the stern, and you can also use them both in the separate directions like this to turn the ship on the spot. With a ship like this where you have 2 asphalt thrusters, you can also mimic these exact same movements using the thrusters, like the asphalt thrusters, and you don't really need bow thrusters and stern thrusters, but they're there as a safety measure for more quick and easy maneuvering. So we have obviously a autopilot, and we also have a heading hold. So let's give it some throttle and speed. So if you enable the heading hold like that, it's now showing a line on the map heading 187 degrees, which means that the ship will keep to 187 degrees. Even if there's a lot of winds and waves, it's going to keep the ship on that course. And of course, if you press A and D and try to steer, then it's going to disable the heading hold. So autopilot functions as most autopilots do. You set a waypoint, you plot in the course, toggle autopilot, and the ship is now turning towards that waypoint. And the map is displaying how far away that waypoint is, 0.6 nautical miles, and also the heading the ship is going to take to keep to that heading. So, another interesting thing I need to mention: if you have the sticky throttle enabled like now, and you reach the destination, the ship will continue to drive. But if I drive without the sticky throttle on, the autopilot is now feeding all the throttle to the ship it needs. Which means that when we reach the destination, the autopilot will turn off and the ship is going to stop at the destination. You can see that the ship is tilting a little bit. That's because obviously Stormworks physics is not really well suited for handling large ships with such a huge displacement and weight. But the ship is very stable in the way that you can turn it completely around, completely capsize it, and it will correct itself. So let's turn the autopilot off, and then it's releasing the throttle. On the top screens here, you have, on the outermost screens, you have cameras mounted on the bridge wings, which have a view of the deck on each side and also the side of the ship, which can be used to help you while docking. You have also a camera over the engine room. This is pretty important to have on vessels where you don't normally have the engine room manned at all times, because then the driver of the ship can keep an eye on the engine room if they so they can detect problems like if they see an oil leak or a fire or smoke developing. So that's a pretty important safety tool. You also have a wind gauge, this small screen on the top there, which shows the wind speed and the wind direction. A very simple made script there. Normal analog compass ball, of course. This is the same screen, which is also located on port side console, showing the RPS, temperature, fuel, and calculated range. So the calculated range is not 100% correct, but it will pinpoint your range roughly. Okay, so now I have gone through most of the basics on the maneuvering of the ship. It will take some practice, but there's a lot of tools there to help you get into it. So there's another feature which is included in the complex version, and as you probably can see, I am now recording on the complex version and not the light version. The light version is not going to have this top row screen. It's going to have less equipment on the side consoles, and it's not going to have these, which are the bridge wing controls. So to enable the bridge wing controls, I have to push this button, which will now take away the controls from the helm seat here. And you can go to either one of the bridge wings, and you can see that the screens here are now turned on. And here you have all the same controls you have at the helm seat. You have the control for stern and bow thrusters. You also have control for each of the azimuth thrusters, but you're using buttons to control them, as you can see. And you push the button in order to give throttle. And you obviously don't have a seat, so I'm going to do it all in first person, all for the realism. And you also have a button to reset steering angle, just like you have in the helm seat. The next thing we're going to look at is two very important pieces of equipment, which is the water cannons and the searchlights. The searchlights are mounted on the top of each bridge wing like that, and the water cannons are mounted on each side of the bow. You control each of the correlating water cannons and searchlights from the bridge wings. So, for example, turn on the water cannon here. You have buttons to rotate it, pitch it up, and you have the exact same on the other bridge wing. And there's the searchlights. Let's make it nighttime. Searchlight on. Let's tilt it down a little bit and forwards. So both the water cannons and searchlights can be rotated 180 degrees along the side of the ship. Next up, I'm going through all the features which you can find on each of the consoles on the bridge. We are now at the port side console, which have of course the power up bridge key and the engine's startup. You also have the anti-collision controls, because the ship does have anti-collision, which will stop the ship if it detects an obstacle coming in at a higher speed than the ship can stop. So it's going to then just cut all the throttle. Even if it's using the autopilot, it's going to disable the autopilot. So if the anti-collision should trigger, an alarm will go off and this indicator will start lighting up, then you have to go over here and push this button, reset the anti-collision. You can't turn on the throttle or anything before you have done that. If you absolutely want to, you can disable the anti-collision. Next we have bilge pump controls. If the ship does detect a leak over at the ship status screen, it's going to activate the bilge pumps to drain the water. You can override the bilge pumps like that. You can also disable them completely. Next thing we have a emergency beacon, which is located up on the roof like that. Simple. You also have buttons to mute the individual alarms. Mute the leak alarm, fire alarm, battery alarm or fuel alarm. Then we have a radio. Each of the consoles have a radio, even the crane controller has a radio, and the helm seat has 2 radios. And these radios are connected to their own antennas. You can set to whatever channel you want, and you just push to talk. That's simple. Then we have the engine monitoring screen, of course. Next thing we have controls for the generators, because the ship does have a set of generators which will turn on automatically if the main battery drops below 95%, and it will also turn off again when the ship battery has reached 100%. You can also do a manual start like that, and we hear the generator starting. And when the battery is now at 97%, it's going to reach 100, then it's going to turn off the generators again. You can also manually stop them, turn them back on, or disable them completely. So let's take a look at the starboard side console, which will, as you can see, have the navigation lights screen. This is a touchscreen, so all these markings are for each of the lights on the navigation lights mast. If you just press set normal, it's going to light up your top light, your stern light, and your side navigation lights. As you can see, green on, red on, front white on, and rear white on. And these ones you can, the ones with a white and red line like that, you can change between the colors. And the yellow one is for towing, of course. So you will have to know how to set all the light characteristics manually. Another radio, of course, and then we have an exterior loudspeaker. You just push here, and there's microphone under the desk to broadcast the audio. We have an emergency beacon locator, which is connected to a speaker and a indicator. So if I just activate the ship's own emergency beacon, now it is receiving the beacon signal, and it also has a gauge here measuring the interval. So now we're at interval 8, which probably is going to be the max interval since it's on the same location. And next we have a very important feature, because the ship is very tall. You cannot get under the train bridges without taking down the navigation lights masts. This one is going to be hit by a bridge if you're trying to go under it. And also keep in mind that the crane also needs to be low enough. But if you push this button, tilt down masts, it's going to tilt down the navigation lights mast, and then you can get under any bridge. Next we have lights on the crane, amber lights. We have main deck lights on the rear deck, and we have lights for the bow deck. The next screen here is off at the moment, but if you press 1, then it turns on the gimbal camera screen. You use WASD to control the gimbal camera. You press the touch buttons to zoom in and out, turn on the infrared mode, stabilizer and tracking and all those kind of features. You have it all. Next thing we have here is a very interesting little tool which you don't see normally a lot in Stormworks, but it is a realistic tool to have on a ship like this, and it's a tool for indicating which direction a radio signal is coming from. So let's see if I can demonstrate. I'm setting this radio to channel 3, and I'm setting the locators to channel 3. And when I'm broadcasting a signal, one of these lines are going to light up, showing which direction that signal is coming from. So that's a way to home in on an emergency broadcast, for example. The last thing we have on this console is the anchor controls. The ship has 2 anchors, one on each side of the bow. You can see the openings there. So you drop the anchor by pushing down this button, and then it's lowering the anchor. It has mag goals which will activate after a certain depth. There we go. And this indicator will light up when the anchor is connected. Let's take the anchor back up. The next thing I'm going to look at is the crane. You can control the crane either from this seat up on the bridge or from a seat down next to the crane. So when you sit down on the crane, you have a couple of controls. These are controls for the main winch on the deck, which is the large winch behind the crane, and also a button for opening and closing the deck hatch, because this ship has an internal cargo space like that. That door down there connects to the engine room, so then you have an option to store more cargo, and if you don't want something stored up on the deck and is stored a bit more safely, you can tuck it down there. It also can fit 2 containers. Another normal radio, of course. You also have a handheld radio and a couple of binoculars there. So as you can see, the crane controls are A and D to rotate the crane, WS to pitch the crane main boom, left and right to take the winch up and down, and press up down to control the knuckle boom. This is what's called a knuckle boom crane. It has a main boom and an outer boom called a knuckle boom. The advantage with this is that you can actually move things very close to the base of the crane and have a lot more control of where the winch is at all times. And now we're going to look at some of the deck equipment. Obviously we have the crane and a large main winch. You can control the winch either from up at the crane seat at the bridge or from this console here, which you have winch out and winch in controls. You can also control that deck hatch from here. Then we have 3 buttons for the connectors on the deck here, the electric connectors. And those are made to keep containers. So you can place 3 containers and secure them to the deck here. The crane is also suited for containers because it has 4 rope anchors, which you can then stretch out into each corner of a container and thereby lift it and keep it oriented in the same direction. On the main deck part you have 8 of these medium winches all along each side, where you can give the winch a signal, which means you can attach these mag-alls I have here. These are the large ones, which are mostly more suited for the crane, of course, but we have the smaller ones. So you just pick up one of the mag-alls, you run over to the winch, attach it like that. If you push the button, you have a mag-all connection. So the crane has the same concept, where you have this button, toggle winch connector signal. So you can connect either one of these smaller mag-alls like this one, or you can attach one of these 2 large ones. And these ones also have a weighted block in them, so you can lower them into the ocean without any problem. And obviously you have the same button to control it up on the bridge crane control seat as well. We have a lot of equipment stored here. These like small racks of safety equipment is found all around the ship, with the defibrillator, first aid kit and fire extinguishers. We have some extra electric cables over here, and some more cables, hoses, and just some quick grab welding equipment. And next we have the power and fuel connection. This power connector goes directly to the main battery, so you can connect it to whatever you want in case you need to charge some other kind of vehicle, or the ship needs to be recharged because of a flat battery. And then we have the fuel connecting. Obviously it runs on diesel. There's a measurement of the fuel tank, and you can pump fuel both in and out, which means you can also refuel other ships with your own fuel tank. For example, you have this boat, a tender or a mob boat, MOB standing for man overboard. So this is a boat that's quick and easy to deploy. You're using the crane. I'm going to demonstrate that later. But you can refuel the mob boat through the ship's fuel tank. You just connect this one over to the mob boat tank, and you just press pump fuel out. You can also recharge it that way. So as you can see, I have now connected the winch of the crane to the top rope anchor on the mob boat. So now I'm ready to launch the boat into the water, but it has two buttons, a button there and a button there, and that's to release the connector for the boat. It has a sliding connector located under the boat to keep it in place. So now the boat is disconnected. So I'm bringing the crane right above the boat. This is the great thing about a knuckle boom crane like this. Then I'm taking the winch up carefully. Because the ropes are pretty bouncy. Taking the boat out. Lowering the crane. Keeping the boat to the side of the ship like that. Don't blame me for the janky Stormworks physics. And there we have the boat in place. And now I can head down to the boat. I'm disconnecting the rope. I'm just placing it on the rope anchor over here, so I don't lose the connection to the winch. I sit down in the seat, main power on, engine on, navigation lights on. So this boat has a top speed of 39 knots and a range of around 60 kilometers. It's running on a small diesel engine. You can also use this sticky throttle lever, which will just add to the WS throttle. So now I'm no longer holding W. You also have lots of equipment back here. A huge selection of equipment. Everything from first aid to repair, hose, cable, ropes, even more ropes up front. So now I am back at the bridge, and I'm going to take the elevator down to the engine room. So the engine room is at deck number 2. On the buttons in the elevator you have a sort of description of what you can find on each of the separate decks. So now we're at deck 3 and deck 2. So all the lights are left off as standard, of course, to reduce the lag. So the engine room is in this door up here, but we're going to look at the engine control room first, which is right next to it. So we have the same ship status screen as we had up on the bridge. We have screens for each of the engines, displaying the RPS and temperature, and also the generator engines. Here we also have a button for overriding engine room auto fire suppression system. So if I turn that on, all the fire suppression is turned on. Here we also have controls for the generators, and also to turn the engines on and off. And here we have a pretty important part. This is all the electrical. We have the main power, switch to reserve battery, engine power, lights power, equipment power. And there's 5 different battery systems on board. There's the main battery and reserve battery, but there's also starter batteries for each of the main engines and also the generator engines. So let's step into the engine room. So the engines consist of 2 blocks with 8 engines in each, 8 large diesel engines, of course. So that's a total of 16 large diesel engines. So this way it can run at 30 knots top speed at just 9 RPS, which keeps the fuel consumption nice and low compared to any ship this size, of course. The main engines are also connected to a large generator each, so it will produce power without the generator engines themselves being activated. So, of course, fire suppression systems, these orange pipes. We have some more batteries here, and here's the, like, I've kind of mimicked the mechanisms for the Asper thrusters, so these will actually turn with the thrusters. Some more bilge pumps here. This area in general isn't very much decorated, just because it's a more practical area than a aesthetic area. And here we have the door into the cargo area. Lots of welding torches, of course, and you can go all the way around the engines to do any kind of repairs, so you can reach every part of the engine to repair it. A lot of bilge pumps down here, obviously. And here we have the 2 generator engines. They are interlinked and power a total of 8 medium generators. We also have a hatch here for the fuel tank, and so if you unlock this hatch and step down, you're actually inside the fuel tank. This is to do repairs which you can't reach from anywhere else, but I will not recommend going down there when the fuel is, well, I won't recommend opening the hatch, of course, if there is fuel in the tank, because the fuel will start to leak into the engine room. We also have fire suppression here, because batteries can easily catch fire. These are some of the main batteries. And this door passes into the rest of the lowest deck, deck 1. So I have now gone through all the most important parts of the ship. Now I'm just going to cover the interior. So we're down at deck number 1. This deck is mainly just storage. You have a lot of storage rooms, not only decorative storage rooms, but actually equipment. Like here, lots of firefighting gear, lots of safety gear. And in here we have a lot of diving gear and repairs, repair tools. Also have a front storage here. These kind of areas are important to have access to because, for example, this is the lowest part of the bow, which is also the part of the ship that's going to receive the most damage if there is to be a collision. So it's important to be able to reach these areas in order to do repairs. Here, for example, we have the electric engine for the bow thruster. So we have the main staircase, and we can also take the elevator, of course. Since I'm just going deck by deck, I'm going to take the staircase up to deck 2, and now we're back at the deck where the engine room is. We also have a few technical rooms like this. This is actually the starter batteries for each of the main engines and the generator engines. These are fuel pumps and water cannon pumps. We also have a few more technical rooms, like this one, and a toilet in here. I'm not going to cover every single room, of course. Small workshop space. And in this front part of deck 2 we have most of the cabins. Well, most cabin beds at least. 2 bathrooms here. And all these cabins down on deck 2, they are double cabins. Cabin B7, which is the most forward cabin, is a 4-man cabin, which is also pretty spacious. So let's head up to deck number 3. And deck number 3 is where the most stuff is happening. Because here we have one of the entrances. This is like the deck worker entrance, because you have a changing room with equipment, so when you've been out working on the deck, you don't have to drag your dirty clothes all the way to your cabin, you just step straight into the changing room. We also have a shower in the room next door, and another toilet. So on deck 3 we also have a gym. A small gym, because ships like this they are mostly out working months at a time, so you do have to have those kind of essential accommodations. Med bay, of course, and we have the laundry room. We have more cabins. These are larger single cabins. And another toilet for the people living on this deck. And the forwardmost room is the cinema. Yes, this is actually a thing that's pretty common for larger offshore ships, which spend such a long time out at sea. So this is actually pretty common to have. So now we can go up to deck number 4. And up here we have the galley. So here the chef even has a view of the deck. And here we also have an entrance. This entrance is kind of like the main entrance of the ship. With this, these stairs also go up to deck number 5 here. We're going to look at that later. We have lots of small but very nice single cabins with their own windows. We have this large public space here, and the largest and best cabins on this deck. We also have some like meeting rooms and offices. And a bathroom with a bathtub as well. And a skylight, which is located up on the bow deck. We also have a door leading out to the front of the bow, because here we have equipment like the anchor winches and extra storage for ropes. You can take this ladder up to the bow deck. Like this. So this is important to access for mooring and repairs and such. So let's head up to deck number 5. We also have a door accessing the outside here. So deck 5, that's the common room, which is the place most of the crew is going to hang out when not at work. It's also a place for social gathering and meetings. We also have a small TV here. Doors accessing both sides of the superstructure through this room. And now the next staircase leads up to the bridge. Here we also have a toilet, which the bridge crew will mostly use. And a very, very revealing window So I believe that is all. I've gone through all the interior, all the equipment. So I hoped that this video was to some help with understanding the ship and how to use it. If you have any questions, just leave a comment down in either the YouTube video, the workshop page, or you can contact me or on my Discord server. Don't hesitate to ask any questions at all, but I'm probably not going to answer questions which are clearly answered either in this video or in the description. Like if someone asks me how do I start the ship, I'm not going to answer that. If you're interested, I also do a live stream at Twitch every Sunday, where I usually do smaller build projects. I might end up doing some more kind of different streams in the future. We'll just have to wait and see. So, thank you for watching through. Hope you enjoy the ship, and goodbye.